She was a widow, twice. Used for pleasure but denied her purpose. Cast aside, forgotten, and left to wither in silence. Her name was Tamar. To men, she was nothing more than a shadow of shame. But to God, she was a woman chosen for destiny. What began in betrayal and disgrace would break forth into one of the greatest legacies in history, the very bloodline of kings and the Messiah himself. This is the story of Tamar, the woman men tried to erase, but God remembered forever. The sun dipped low over the hills of Canaan, painting the sky with streaks of fire as Tamar adjusted her veil. She was young, hopeful, and newly married, her heart pounding with the excitement of being called a wife. Her husband was Er, the firstborn son of Judah, one of Jacob's 12 sons. But beneath her hope lay an uneasy silence. Er was not like other men. His eyes carried a darkness, his steps heavy with arrogance. Though Tamar tried to be the gentle wife, his heart was hardened. Corrupt, selfish, and filled with wickedness. Scripture spares no details, only declaring with stark simplicity, Er was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Tamar's world crumbled in an instant. She became a widow before she even had the chance to bear a child. In a culture where a woman's honor and future rested on children, especially sons, this was more than grief, it was devastation. The house that had welcomed her now whispered behind her back. Pity followed her footsteps. She could almost hear the unspoken questions, what will become of her now? According to the custom of the day, the law of Levirate marriage, Judah was bound to give his second son, Onan, to Tamar, so that she might bear children in Er's name. Onan was handsome and clever, but cunning in a way that masked his selfish heart. At first, Tamar's heart lifted, perhaps now she would find stability, perhaps now her womb would bring forth the children that would secure her place. But Onan had no intention of building his brother's name. He wanted pleasure without responsibility, intimacy without legacy. He used Tamar, but each time, he refused to give her what she longed for most, a child. He wanted her body, but not the burden of her destiny. And the Lord, who sees what men hide, grew angry at Onan's deceit. The judgment was swift. Just as Er had fallen, Onan too was struck down by God. Tamar was widowed again. Twice cursed, twice left empty, twice covered in the ashes of grief. Her eyes became rivers of tears. Women in the village avoided her gaze, some whispering that she was cursed, others shaking their heads in sorrow. The promise of her youth was swallowed by the silence of her womb. Judah looked at her now with suspicion. His sons were gone, and the common eye began to draw dangerous conclusions. Perhaps this woman carries death in her hands. Perhaps she is the cause. Fear twisted Judah's heart, and though his duty was clear, he recoiled from it. He had one son left, Shelah, still young and unready for marriage. By custom, Shelah should have been Tamar's next husband, the one to carry on the family name. Judah's lips spoke duty, but his eyes betrayed his heart. Remain a widow in your father's house, he told Tamar, until Shelah grows up. Tamar bowed her head, but inside, she felt the weight of a promise laced with deception. Judah had no intention of giving Shelah to her. He feared for his last son's life, and rather than confront the truth, that God's judgment was on his wicked sons, he laid the silent blame at Tamar's feet. So she was sent away, back to her father's house, back to the shadows of waiting. Shelah grew. Seasons passed. The blossoms of spring returned each year, but Tamar's womb remained empty. She wore widow's clothes like a shroud, the black fabric whispering of her grief. Each day she waited. Each year she hoped. But Judah's promise faded with the seasons. The truth pressed in on her, she was not only a widow. She had been forgotten. And yet, though men turned their backs, the God of heaven still watched. Her tears did not fall unnoticed. Her loneliness was not lost in the wind. In the courts of heaven, her story was not yet finished. For Tamar, used and forgotten, was still seen by God. The years slipped by like sand through open fingers. Tamar watched the seasons change from the quiet confines of her father's house, the garments of her widowhood still clinging to her like chains. Shelah, the boy who was promised to her, grew into manhood. His voice deepened, his shoulders broadened, his steps became those of a man ready to take a wife. But no messenger came from Judah's house. No word was sent to honor the vow he had made. Tamar's father looked at her with pity, her mother sighed with quiet resignation. In the market, whispers trailed behind her, stinging sharper than thorns, "That is the woman whose husbands died. That is the barren widow still waiting." Tamar knew the truth. Judah had deceived her. He had sent her away not with hope, but with a lie. She had been tucked out of sight, hidden away like an inconvenient secret, abandoned to rot in the silence of her father's household. Each night, she lay on her mat staring into the darkness, her heart heavy with questions. Why had her life unraveled so cruelly? Was she cursed, or had the wickedness of Judah's sons spilled over onto her head? Sometimes she clenched her fists in anger, sometimes she wept until dawn. And still, heaven was silent. Judah, meanwhile, carried on with his life. He buried his wife, Shua's daughter, and mourned her death. But as the months of mourning passed, his life resumed. He traveled, he worked, he dealt with his flocks and herds. He lived as though Tamar no longer existed. One day, news reached Tamar's ears. Judah was going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, a season of festivity, when men would drink, laugh, and loosen the restraints of grief. Her heart quickened as she heard the words. For years she had been silent, obedient, patient. But in that moment, a flicker of resolve ignited within her. If Judah would not give her what was due, if he would deny her justice and cut her off from her rightful place in the family, then she would act. Not in rebellion, but in courage. Not in vengeance, but in a desperate pursuit of the destiny she knew was hers. She sat in her chamber, the shadows long against the wall, and removed the garments of widowhood. Slowly, carefully, she wrapped herself in another identity. A veil covered her face, concealing the lines of grief that had etched themselves into her features. She dressed as a woman of the roadside, her form hidden yet enticing, her eyes the only truth visible. When she rose, she was no longer Tamar the forgotten widow. She was a woman on a mission, determined to seize the inheritance that had been denied her. At the gate of Enaim, near the road to Timnah, she sat and waited. The road was dusty, the sun sinking low, and in the distance she saw him, Judah, the man who had deceived her, walking with his friend Hira. His step was lighter, his heart drunk with the relief of shearing season, his eyes careless. Judah's gaze fell upon her. The veil did its work, he did not recognize the widow of his sons. He saw only a woman by the roadside, and desire stirred in him. Her heart pounded. The plan was risky, dangerous. If she were exposed, she could be killed. If she failed, she would carry shame forever. But she did not flinch. For Tamar knew, to remain silent was to remain forgotten. To act was to open the door to her redemption. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the road. Judah drew near. Tamar steadied her breath, her eyes fixed, her spirit braced. The moment had come. The veil concealed her face, but not her courage. Tamar sat at the crossroads, the dust of the road swirling around her feet as shepherds passed with their flocks, glancing briefly at the veiled woman by the gate. To them, she was just another figure of the roadside, perhaps a prostitute, perhaps a stranger. But beneath the cloth, her heart beat with a plan that would alter generations. Judah's footsteps drew closer. He laughed with his friend Hira, the sound heavy with wine and relief after the shearing of sheep. His cloak swung loosely at his side, and though the years had furrowed lines across his face, his appetite for pleasure had not faded. His eyes rested on Tamar. "Come, let me be with you," Judah said, his voice low, driven more by desire than discernment. Tamar's breath caught in her throat, but she forced her tone steady. What will you give me, that you may come into me? Judah's words came swiftly, careless, I will send you a young goat from my flock. The corners of Tamar's mouth trembled beneath her veil, not with laughter, but with the weight of strategy. A goat was nothing compared to what she sought. She needed proof, evidence undeniable. Will you give me a pledge until you send it? She asked. Judah frowned, impatient. What pledge shall I give you? Tamar's eyes locked on his, sharp through the veil. Your seal, your cord, and your staff that is in your hand. It was a bold demand. The seal was his identity, pressed into clay to mark ownership. The cord bound it to his neck or wrist. The staff was his symbol of authority. To surrender them was to surrender his very name. But Judah, blinded by desire, did not hesitate. He handed them over, never imagining the trap he had walked into. And so, under the veil of night, Tamar conceived, not in lust, but in a desperate act of justice. The child she carried was not born of immorality, but of her bold determination to claim what was rightfully hers, a place in Judah's family, a continuation of her husband's line, a seed for the future God had promised. When the encounter ended, Judah departed, his seal, cord, and staff left in her hands like treasures of destiny. He returned to his house, never suspecting who she was, never guessing that the woman he had wronged was the same woman he had embraced. Days later, Hira, Judah's friend, took the promised goat to the gate of Enaim to retrieve the pledge. But the veiled woman was gone. The townspeople shook their heads. There has been no shrine prostitute here. Confused, Hira returned to Judah. Judah shrugged, uneasy but unwilling to pursue the matter further. Let her keep them, he said, or we shall be laughed at. His seal, his cord, his staff, his very identity, remained in Tamar's possession, hidden like arrows in a quiver, waiting for the moment when truth would strike. Back in her father's house, Tamar removed her veil and returned to the garments of widowhood, her secret concealed beneath her clothing. But within her body stirred the evidence of her boldness, life itself, growing and undeniable. For years she had been used and forgotten, but now, she carried not shame, but hope. Though Judah had cast her aside, the God of heaven had not. In her womb rested the beginning of a legacy that would one day shake the very foundations of history. The risk had been taken. The seed had been sown. Tamar, the forsaken widow, was about to become the mother of destiny. The months passed, and Tamar's secret could no longer be hidden. Her belly rounded, the swell of life pushing against the folds of her widow's garments. The women in her father's household began to whisper. Eyes followed her in the marketplace. News spread quickly, like wildfire in dry grass. Have you heard? Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law, is pregnant, and she is still a widow. The whispers hardened into accusations. A harlot. A disgrace. An abomination. Tamar bore the stares in silence, but her heart pounded with fear. She knew the law. A woman accused of immorality could be condemned, even to death. The news reached Judah, and his reaction was swift, fierce, and dripping with hypocrisy. Bring her out, he declared, rage masking his guilt. Let her be burned. The words tore through the air like a blade. Judah, who had deceived her, who had withheld his son, who had cast her into shadows, now demanded her destruction. His pride wanted blood. His lips spoke judgment, though his hands were far from clean. Tamar was seized, her arms pulled, her steps heavy as the crowd gathered. Flames licked in the imagination of the people, judgment seemed certain. But Tamar's spirit did not tremble. She had been silent long enough. Now, the moment of truth had come. As they dragged her forward, she reached into her garments and drew out the objects she had guarded like treasure, the seal, the cord, and the staff. Her voice, calm yet cutting, carried over the crowd. By the man to whom these belong, I am with child. Look closely, whose seal and cord and staff are these? A hush fell. Eyes widened. The crowd turned to Judah. The evidence was undeniable. His color drained, his lips parted, and for the first time, his arrogance crumbled. He saw himself exposed, not Tamar. His own staff, his own cord, his own seal, the very marks of his name, were now the proof of his guilt. Judah staggered under the weight of the revelation. His words cracked the silence, trembling but true, "She is more righteous than I, since I would not give her to my son Shelah." The crowd gasped. Tamar, once condemned, now stood vindicated. Her innocence shone brighter than the accusations hurled against her. Judah bowed his head, admitting what he could not deny: he had been the deceiver, not her. No fire touched Tamar that day. No stone struck her. Instead, God himself raised her from the ashes of disgrace and placed honor on her head. From that day forward, Judah never touched her again. But the child within her continued to grow, carrying within him a destiny Judah himself could not yet imagine. What men had meant for shame, God had turned into vindication. The months of waiting turned into the hours of labor. Tamar's cries echoed through the chamber as the midwives gathered, their hands ready, their faces tense. Sweat beaded her brow, her body trembling with the force of life pressing through her. She was no longer the widow clothed in shame, she was the mother of promise, carrying the fruit of her bold faith. At last, the moment came. A tiny hand pushed through, crimson and fragile. The midwife gasped and quickly tied a scarlet thread around the wrist. "This one came out first," she announced. But in an instant, the child drew back, and his brother pressed past him with a sudden burst of strength. Another cry filled the air, sharper, louder, as the second twin emerged first. The midwife's eyes widened. "How did you break out first?" she exclaimed. "So this one shall be called Perez, meaning breaking forth." Then came the first child, marked with the scarlet thread, and he was called Zerah. Perez and Zerah. 2 sons, 2 testimonies that God had turned disgrace into destiny. The house that once cast Tamar aside was now forced to see her arms full, her lap blessed, her womb vindicated. She, the forgotten widow, became the mother of twins whose names would echo through the generations. But the story did not end in that chamber. Centuries later, the lineage of Perez would be traced, written carefully by scribes and remembered in the sacred scrolls. From Perez came Hezron, and from Hezron came Ram, and from Ram came Boaz, the kinsman redeemer who married Ruth. From Boaz came Obed, the father of Jesse, and from Jesse came David, the shepherd boy who became king. And from David's royal line came the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Tamar, the woman once used, forgotten, and condemned, became a mother of kings. Her name, spoken in shame by her neighbors, was carved in honor in the genealogy of the Messiah. In Matthew's Gospel, amid the roll call of fathers and sons, her name shines as one of the few women remembered, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. What began in sorrow ended in glory. What looked like disgrace became a doorway to redemption. Tamar's life was proof of this eternal truth: when men forget, God remembers. Tamar's story reminds us of a God who never forgets. She was used, deceived, and left to rot in silence, but heaven saw her tears. Where men abandoned her, God lifted her. Where shame tried to consume her, God wrote her name into the lineage of Jesus. Her life is a testimony: no injustice, no betrayal, no season of waiting can erase God's plan. The world may call you forgotten, but God calls you chosen. So if you feel overlooked, if life has broken your heart, remember Tamar. God can turn disgrace into destiny, and your pain into a legacy of glory. If Tamar's story spoke to your heart, don't leave without sharing it. Someone you know needs to hear that God never forgets the broken. Hit the like button to help more people find this story. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful biblical retellings that will strengthen your faith. And in the comments, type, "God never forgets me," as your declaration of faith today. Remember, every time you engage, you're not just supporting this channel, you're spreading the message of hope to thousands of others who need it.